My name is Olivia Riley, and for years I was the girl who served you. Coffee with a tired smile, the one working double shifts at a greasy diner, just to keep my head above water. But that's not the occupation that defines me now. My most significant, all-consuming job, for one relentless year, became something far more complex. I became the architect of a meticulous, unavoidable reckoning. I just discovered the real reason why my life felt like a slow-motion train wreck for 3 soul-crushing years. And the truth was a betrayal so profound it almost broke me. They thought I'd never uncover the truth about who was truly living my life while I was just surviving theirs. There are layers to this story, multiple truths that will be revealed. Truths about family, about the deceptive shimmer of appearances, and the terrifying ease with which an identity can be stolen. Especially when the thief shares your face, your blood. I remember countless nights staring at the peeling paint on my tiny studio apartment ceiling, a knot of anxiety in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe, wondering why I was failing so spectacularly at adulting, while others seemed to glide through. That feeling of being perpetually behind of an invisible weight dragging me down, it wasn't just in my head. It was real, orchestrated, and cruelly personal. If you've ever experienced that sinking feeling of being gaslighted, of having your reality questioned, or had your trust shattered by someone you loved, someone you should have been able to trust implicitly, then comment and subscribe, you might find a piece of your own story in mine. Trust me, if you're someone who believes in justice even when the system seems designed to fail you, this story will change how you see family, and perhaps even revenge forever. To understand the depth of the chasm that opened in my life, you need to understand where I came from. I'm Olivia, and I have an identical twin sister, Maya. From the moment we took our first breaths mere minutes apart, the world seemed determined to differentiate us in the most predictable ways, yet it was our parents who cemented these distinctions into immutable truths. I was labeled the quiet one, the serious one, the responsible one. Maya, on the other hand, was the charming one, the spirited one, the one who needed a little extra help she always unfailingly received. Our childhood home, a comfortable suburban 2-story, should have been a haven of equality. Instead, it was a finely tuned ecosystem of favoritism, so ingrained it felt like the very air we breathed. My earliest memories are tinged with this imbalance. Birthdays, for instance. We'd have joint parties, of course, to be fair. But Maya's cake, by some unspoken parental decree, was always slightly larger, more elaborately decorated. Her pile of presents, augmented by a few extra things she really wanted, always dwarfed mine, even if my report card showed straight A's while hers boasted a collection of C's and charmingly written excuses. I remember one year I'd painstakingly saved my allowance for a specific science kit. Maya wanted a dollhouse that cost 3 times as much. My science kit was deemed too niche, while the dollhouse became the centerpiece of her gift pile purchased with a significant parental contribution. "Maya just appreciates these things more, Olivia," my mother Carol would say with a gentle, dismissive smile. School projects were another battleground. I'd spend weeks in the library meticulously researching, crafting my presentations with a diligence that bordered on obsession. Maya would remember hers the night before, and a flurry of parental activity would ensue. My father, Tom, a man who otherwise seemed astute in his engineering career, would suddenly become an expert diorama builder or history summarizer for Maya. Her hastily assembled parent-assisted project would invariably be met with coos of, "Oh, Maya, that's so creative," while my carefully researched work would get a cursory, "That's nice, Olivia," very thorough. The injustice burned a small, constant ember in my chest. Sickness was yet another arena. A sniffle from Maya warranted a day off school, a comfy spot on the couch with cartoons and endless cups of juice. When I was ill, truly ill, I was often told to tough it out or not make a fuss. I once had a raging fever and was still expected to complete my chores because Maya needed help with something trivial. The infamous vase incident still makes my stomach clench. A hideous yet sentimentally valuable porcelain vase from my grandmother sat on our mantelpiece. One afternoon, while I was reading in my room, I heard a crash. I ran out to find Maya standing amidst the glittering shards, a look of theatrical horror on her face. Before I could utter a word, she wailed, "Olivia pushed me." She knocked it over. My parents rushed in. My denials were drowned out by Maya's crocodile tears. I was grounded for a month, my allowance docked to pay for a replacement that was never actually bought. Maya, the true culprit, received comforting hugs. "She's just more sensitive than you, Olivia," my mother would sigh later, as if that explained and excused everything. Even college choices reflected this deep-seated bias. I earned a partial scholarship to a decent state university for a business degree, a practical choice I knew I'd have to supplement with part-time work. Maya declared she wanted to pursue an elusive arts management degree at a private, far more expensive, liberal arts college. There was no scholarship for Maya, just a declaration of passion. My parents, who had always pleaded tight finances when it came to my extras, somehow found the funds for Maya's tuition and dorm. "She needs the right environment to blossom, dear," Dad explained, patting my shoulder. "You're practical. You'll manage." My mother, Carol, was a woman who seemed to crave the reflected glory of a charming, popular daughter. Maya provided that. Mom herself had been a somewhat overlooked middle child, and I often wondered if she was vicariously living out a preferred childhood through Maya. She was a homemaker, and her world revolved around her children, but predominantly around Maya's perceived needs. She wasn't overtly cruel. It was a softer, more insidious form of neglect for me. The neglect of acknowledgement of equal emotional investment. My father, Tom, was an engineer, a man of logic and reason in his professional life, but bafflingly blind at home. He often seemed weary of conflict, and Maya, with her practiced dramatics, could create conflict out of thin air if her desires weren't met. It was easier, I suppose, to acquiesce to Maya to let Carol manage the emotional stuff, and thus he became a passive enabler of the disparity. I wasn't without talent. I had a knack for numbers, a keen analytical mind that saw patterns easily, the very skills that would later serve me in an entirely different capacity. I also loved to write, to pour out the frustrations and observations I couldn't voice onto the pages of a journal. My English teacher once told me I had a gift for narrative. When I shyly mentioned this at home, Maya had just announced she was thinking about joining the drama club. My potential writing talent was met with, "Oh, that's a nice little hobby, Olivia. Make sure you focus on your math, though. That's more useful." Maya's fleeting interest in drama, however, prompted discussions about acting lessons. So I learned to be self-sufficient. I learned to keep my achievements quiet because they were rarely celebrated, and to expect disappointment because it was a familiar companion. This carefully constructed family dynamic, this constant low hum of being secondary, became the fertile ground upon which Maya's later, more devastating betrayals would grow. I was already conditioned to be overlooked, to have my concerns dismissed. Who would believe me when the real storm finally hit the years after college were a masterclass in this established pattern of disappointment, each instance a fresh layer on an already substantial foundation of resentment? It wasn't just about childhood trinkets anymore. It was about life milestones, career aspirations, and basic human dignity. Academically, I'd graduated with honors debt I was steadily paying off from my diner job and a quiet sense of pride. I remember mentioning at a family dinner that I'd been recognized as Employee of the Month at the diner. A small thing, but it meant extra hours and a tiny bonus I desperately needed. The announcement was met with a polite nod before my mother immediately turned to Maya. "And Maya, darling, how is that wonderful volunteer work going at the animal shelter, Maya?" Who I knew had spent the previous week binge-watching a new series and ordering takeout launched into a poignant, entirely fabricated tale of rescuing a litter of kittens complete with tearful embellishments. My parents hung on her every word. "Oh, Maya, you have such a big heart," my father said, his voice thick with emotion. I just pushed my mashed potatoes around my plate, the Employee of the Month certificate feeling like a worthless piece of paper in my pocket. My internal monologue was a bitter whisper. Why do I even bother, career-wise? I was slogging. Double shifts at Rosie's Diner paid the bills for my cramped studio apartment and my loan repayments, but it was grueling. I'd applied for entry-level office jobs, anything to use my degree, but the market was tough, and my resume lacking the sparkle of unpaid internships Maya always seemed to have time for, or claimed to have often when unnoticed. Then a glimmer of hope, I was offered an assistant manager trainee position at the diner. It meant more responsibility, slightly better pay, and a step up. I carefully shared this news. That very same week, Maya announced with much fanfare that she'd been headhunted for a prestigious and entirely fictional junior coordinator role at a new international arts nonprofit. She described a rigorous interview process and exciting future projects. My parents were ecstatic, planning a celebratory dinner for her. The trainee position, my small, tangible step forward, was utterly eclipsed. Later, I found out the nonprofit had a website that looked like it was designed in an hour, with no actual staff listed beyond a vague founding director. Personal achievements were similarly dismissed. For my 25th birthday, I treated myself to a nice dinner alone. A small steak and a glass of wine a luxury. My parents sent a generic card. A week later, it was Maya's 25th. They threw her a lavish party at a trendy downtown bar, complete with a professional DJ and an open tab. "She has so many important connections to cultivate, Olivia," my mother explained when I quietly asked about the disparity. "It's an investment in her future." I didn't ask whose money was funding this investment. The psychological impact was a slow, steady erosion of my self-worth. Was I truly so unremarkable, so undeserving of notice or celebration? One particularly painful dialogue scene replays in my mind. It was after one of Maya's many dramas, a supposed falling out with a colleague at her phantom nonprofit. She was sobbing in the living room, Carol and Tom fussing over her. I'd just come home exhausted after a 12-hour shift, my feet aching, smelling of fried onions. "It's just so unfair," Maya wailed. "People are so jealous of my drive." My mother stroked her hair. "Don't you worry, sweetie. You're destined for great things. Some people just can't handle strong women." I made the mistake of trying to offer a practical suggestion. "Maybe you could document what happened, Maya, for HR." Maya's head snapped up, her eyes flashing. "What would you know about corporate politics? Olivia, you just flip burgers." Before I could respond, my father chimed in. "Maya's right, Olivia. This is a delicate situation. Let us handle it." I retreated to my tiny room that night, feeling smaller than ever. "Not just burgers, Dad. I manage inventory, I do the nightly cash outs, I train new staff. But you wouldn't know that. Another time I really tried to connect with my mother. I found her alone in the kitchen one afternoon. "Mom," I began tentatively, Sometimes I feel like you guys don't really see me, like nothing I do is ever good enough or as important as what Maya does." She sighed, not unkindly, but with a weariness that spoke volumes. "Oh, Olivia, you're always so sensitive. It's not that we don't see you, it's just Maya needs more support. She feels things so deeply. You've always been the strong one, the independent one." Her words, meant perhaps to be a compliment, felt like a condemnation. My strength was taken for granted, my independence a reason to be ignored. My internal monologue screamed, "I'm strong because I have to be. I'm independent because you gave me no other choice." It wasn't all bleak. I had a few constants. Maria, a fellow waitress at Rosie's, a single mom with a wicked sense of humor and a heart of gold, was my rock. She saw my struggles, listened to my rants, and always offered a sympathetic ear and a cup of strong, sugary coffee. "Don't let them grind you down, chica," she'd say. "You've got a good head on your shoulders. One day you'll show them all." There was also Mr. Henderson, my old high school English teacher, whom I occasionally emailed. He always responded with encouragement, reminding me of the potential he'd seen in my writing. These small pockets of validation were lifelines. The most recent major disappointment, the one that pricked the bubble of my weary acceptance right before the real catastrophe hit, involved a professional development course I'd been saving for. It was an online bookkeeping certification, something I hoped would help me finally escape the diner. I'd squirreled away nearly $500. Then came a frantic call from Mom. Maya had a sudden, unexpected bill. Something about a deposit for an artistic retreat that was non-refundable and crucial for her career development. Could I possibly lend her the money? Just for a little while, the pressure was immense. You know your sister Olivia, she gets so stressed about these things. It would mean the world to her. Reluctantly, foolishly, I agreed. The $500 vanished. The artistic retreat never materialized, and the money was never repaid. My bookkeeping course remained a distant dream. This pattern, this endless cycle of being diminished and devalued, was more than just frustrating. It was psychologically damaging. It made me doubt my own perceptions, my own worth. And crucially, it made the idea that Maya could betray me on an even grander scale, while still maintaining her innocent, charming facade to our parents entirely plausible. I was already the invisible girl. It was the perfect setup for the ultimate vanishing act, the theft of my entire identity. The trigger, the precise moment the ground beneath my precarious life shattered, arrived with the subtlety of a wrecking ball. I'd found it. My dream apartment. Not a palace, but a clean, bright one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood, a place with a window that didn't just overlook a brick wall. It was a stretch, but I'd done the math. With my assistant manager trainee pay bump at Rosie's, I could just about make it. I'd scrimped and saved for the deposit, visualizing myself drinking coffee by that sunny window, finally feeling like I was moving forward. I filled out the application, my hand trembling slightly, with a mixture of hope and nerves. The landlord, a kind-faced older woman, smiled and said she'd run the credit check and be in touch. The call came 3 days later. "I'm so sorry, Ms. Riley," the landlord said, her voice hesitant, "but we can't approve your application. Your credit score, it's 340. I laughed, a shocked, hollow sound. 340, that's impossible. There must be a mistake. My score is in the high 600s, maybe low 700s. I pay all my bills on time. The report shows 17 open accounts, Ms. Riley, she continued gently, totaling over $47,000 in unpaid debts, credit cards, personal loans, even a student loan for a master's program. The world tilted. 17 accounts, $47,000, a master's program. I hadn't even finished paying off my undergraduate loans. "This isn't me," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "This is a mistake. Someone has stolen my identity." The words felt foreign, dramatic, like something from a TV show. The landlord was sympathetic but firm. The apartment was gone. My dream dissolved into a nightmare. That was wave 1, the initial shock, the brutal impact. Wave 2 was the descent into the rabbit hole of my own life, twisted and perverted by an unseen hand. I immediately ordered my credit reports. They arrived thick as novels filled with unfamiliar transactions. Luxury brands I couldn't pronounce, let alone afford designer handbags. 5-star hotel stays in cities I'd only dreamed of visiting, first-class airline tickets. There were charges for online courses at a prestigious university for a master's in art history, Maya's proclaimed field of interest. The mailing addresses for these accounts were varied. Some were old P.O. boxes, others chillingly were linked to forwarding services that eventually led back to a luxury loft apartment complex in a trendy part of the city, a place I knew Maya frequented, claiming a friend let her use the amenities. A sickening cold dread began to creep through me. My social security number, my date of birth, my name, Olivia Charlotte Riley, all leveraged to build someone else's extravagant life. I confronted Maya not with accusations, not yet, but with a carefully constructed panic. I went to her current borrowed apartment, far nicer than anything I could afford, filled with tasteful art and expensive-looking trinkets. "Maya," I said, my voice shaking authentically. "Something terrible has happened. Someone's stolen my identity. My credit is destroyed. There are thousands of dollars in debt." Maya performed her role flawlessly. Her eyes widened in horror. "Oh my God, Liv, that's hideous. Who could be so cruel?" She offered tea sympathy, a hug that felt like a viper's embrace. "We need to report this immediately. You poor thing." As she spoke, my eyes landed on a brand new It bag perched on her console table, a distinctive design I'd seen flagged on one of the fraudulent credit card statements. The price tag for that bag alone was more than I made in 2 months. The seed of suspicion wasn't just sprouting, it was a venomous vine wrapping itself around my heart. I asked for her help, navigating the reporting process. She was full of vague promises, but always too busy, too overwhelmed with her non-profit commitments. Wave 3 was the soul-crushing bureaucracy of trying to reclaim my name. I filed reports with the police, the FTC, and all 3 credit bureaus. I spent hours on hold, filled out mountains of paperwork, recited my story until my voice was raw. The response was invariably the same, a weary sigh on the other end of the line. Identical twin, you say, that does complicate things. Do you have concrete proof that she opened these accounts and not you? It's your name, your social security number. The system, it seemed, was woefully ill-equipped for this intimate, familial form of fraud. They saw 2 identical faces, 2 identical sets of identifying information. Proving which twin was the liar felt like an insurmountable task. My frustration morphed into a seething, helpless rage. I was drowning and the lifelines were all tangled. My emotional breaking point was a daily occurrence. Sleep became a luxury replaced by a churning vortex of anxiety, betrayal, and a desperate clawing need for justice. At Rosie's, the clatter of dishes, the endless orders, the forced smiles, it all felt heavier, more unbearable. My colleagues noticed the dark circles under my eyes, my frayed temper. Maria would slip me an extra pastry, her eyes full of concern. "You gotta fight this, Olivia," she'd whisper. "Don't let her win." But how? How do you fight a ghost who wears your face? I sometimes wondered about my parents' own childhoods. Had my mother, Carol, been the less favored child, now overcompensating with Maya? Had my father, Tom, learned to avoid conflict at all costs, leading to his passive enabling? I imagined their younger selves perhaps carrying their own unhealed wounds, unknowingly perpetuating a cycle of dysfunction. But understanding their possible motivations didn't lessen the sting of their current blindness. They were still oblivious, still enchanted by Maya's carefully curated image. Then came Wave 4, Maya's engagement. She gathered the family, her eyes sparkling, her hand dramatically outstretched to display a diamond ring the size of a small planet. "Richard proposed," she announced breathlessly. Richard, her fiancé, was an investment banker, successful, handsome, and by all accounts incredibly wealthy. He beamed beside her, clearly besotted. Maya then launched into rapturous descriptions of their wedding plans, a historic mansion overlooking a lake, a guest list of hundreds, a couture gown. My blood ran cold. This lavish fairy tale wedding. How was it being funded? A quick, discreet inquiry into one of the fraudulent accounts later that week confirmed my worst fears. A new enormous charge, bridal couture deposit. She was using my ruined credit, my stolen identity to fund the wedding of her dreams. This wasn't just about debt anymore. This was about her building a life of luxury and lies on the very foundation of my destruction. That was it. The final snap. The despair that had clung to me like a shroud began to burn away, replaced by an ice-cold, crystalline fury. She wasn't just going to get away with it. She was going to celebrate it on my dime, on my name. A new resolve settled in my bones. If the system wouldn't give me justice, I would orchestrate it myself. The quiet, invisible Olivia was about to find her voice and her teeth. Allies and enemies were now starkly defined. Maya was the clear enemy, and my parents, through their willful blindness, were her silent co-conspirators. I needed allies, smart ones. My gaze metaphorically began to turn towards Richard's world. An investment banker would surely understand fraud. And he had a best friend, a lawyer named Jake, whom Maya had mentioned disdainfully as being too serious. Perhaps too serious was exactly what I needed. The stakes had never been higher. This was a battle for my name, my future, my very sanity. One evening, hiding my trembling hands, I was helping Maya sift through wedding invitation samples at her opulent loft. the loft itself likely another perk of her fraudulent empire. She stepped away to take a call, her voice syrupy sweet. "Yes, darling, the platinum package. And the name on the contract, Olivia Riley, of course. My full name for luck." She winked at me as if sharing an inside joke. My name. My full name. The rage that filled me wasn't hot, it was a glacial inferno. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do. Little did she know this wedding would be her grand finale, but not in the way she imagined. The planning had begun. The revelation wasn't a sudden discovery of a new hidden secret about Maya. I already knew the horrifying extent of her deceit. The true revelation was internal, a profound shift in my own being. It was the moment I stopped seeing myself as Olivia the victim and started recognizing Olivia the strategist. The law, with its clumsy, generalized approach, couldn't see past our identical DNA, our shared history etched on official documents. But I could, and I would make damn sure that by the time I was done, the world, or at least her world, would see Maya for the predator she was not the princess she pretended to be. This game-changing moment occurred not in a flash of dramatic insight, but in the quiet, desperate hours of a Tuesday morning, staring at another pile of collection notices addressed to Olivia Riley that were not mine. The utter futility of my official complaints, the dismissive tones of credit agency representatives, the sheer galling audacity of Maya planning her six-figure wedding while I was contemplating selling my few meager possessions to stay afloat, it all coalesced into a single, unshakable decision. She would not win. I would not be erased. The wedding, her supposed crowning achievement, would become her public undoing. My emotional processing was a strange, cold burn. There was a period of intense, silent grief. Not for Maya as she was, but for the sister I'd once naively hoped existed beneath the layers of selfishness. I grieved for the family I'd never truly had. And then, like a fire-consuming deadwood, the grief burned away, leaving behind a hard, sharp core of determination. I mourned that phantom sister, then I buried her deep. There were no more tears. There was only the plan. My internal monologue shifted from a litany of despair to a quiet hum of strategic calculation. They called me the quiet one, the invisible one, the one who wouldn't make waves. They'd mistaken my silence for acquiescence, my reserved nature for weakness. They never realized quiet didn't mean deaf, and invisible didn't mean blind. I saw everything. I remembered every slight, every dismissal, every stolen piece of my life. The meticulousness I'd once applied to my studies, the attention to detail that made me a good, if underappreciated, assistant manager, was now laser-focused on a singular objective: Maya's downfall. My new occupation consumed me. The planning and preparation phase was an intricate dance of stealth and precision. First, evidence gathering. Part 2, I went beyond the credit reports. I started a new encrypted folder on my ancient laptop. I meticulously documented every new fraudulent charge, cross-referencing shipping addresses for online purchases with Maya's known locations. I reactivated a dormant social media account under a fake name to discreetly track Maya's public posts. Her flaunting of new clothes, her check-ins at expensive restaurants, her spontaneous weekend getaways. Each post was a digital breadcrumb leading back to my stolen money. I took screenshots, saved URLs, created a timeline so detailed it could rival a historian's thesis. Then, the private investigator. This was the biggest gamble. Using the last of my emergency savings, money I'd hoarded from extra tips and by eating instant noodles for weeks, I hired a PI. A grizzled ex-cop named Frank who listened to my story with an impassive face that slowly hardened into a look of grim understanding. Frank was worth every penny. He got surveillance photos of Maya entering and exiting the luxury loft building. He managed to get CCTV footage from a boutique showing Maya making a large purchase with a credit card that was under my name but clearly in her possession. He even traced IP addresses for some of the online fraudulent accounts back to devices she regularly used. His report was a damning indictment. Next, the wedding assistance. This was where my performance truly began. I swallowed my revulsion and offered to help Maya with the wedding planning. "Oh, Maya, you look so stressed. Let me take some of this off your plate." She, of course, lapped it up, seeing me as her compliant, ever-helpful little sister. I volunteered to liaise with vendors. With a sweet smile, I'd accidentally ensure my full legal name, Olivia Charlotte Riley, was on every contract, every invoice. When Maya signed, sometimes distractedly while on the phone boasting about her fabulous fiancé, she was signing as me, digging her own financial grave deeper with every flourish of the pen. I helped her choose some of the most expensive vendors, those with ironclad, non-refundable deposit clauses and brutal cancellation penalties. Every charge she gleefully approved, every deposit she made using those tainted credit lines was another strand in the web I was weaving. Simultaneously, I was learning the law. I spent late nights at the public library, not reading novels, but poring over texts on identity theft, financial fraud, contract law, and even the specific statutes in our state regarding these crimes. I needed to understand the legal ramifications for her and the protections for me once the truth was out. The crucial step was reaching out to Jake Frank. My PI had also gathered information on Richard's inner circle. His best friend, Jake Donovan, was a corporate lawyer, known for his sharp mind and unwavering ethics. This was a delicate operation. I couldn't just call him up. I arranged an accidental encounter at a coffee shop near his office, a place Frank had noted he frequented. I bumped into him, spilled a little coffee on myself, not him, and used the ensuing apology to strike up a hesitant conversation. "You're Jake Richards' friend, right? I'm Olivia Maya's sister." Over the next few weeks, I carefully, methodically laid out the truth, presenting him with irrefutable, organized evidence. Not just accusations, but bank statements, shipping confirmations linked to Maya Frank's initial report. Jake's transformation from polite skepticism to shocked horror then, to cold anger on Richard's behalf was palpable. She's done all this to you, and she's doing this to Richard." He was in. He became my invaluable ally, understanding the legal nuances and, more importantly, understanding how to navigate Richard. Finally, with Jake's guidance and the now substantial evidence binder, we approached Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI. Frank had a contact in the white-collar crime division. Agent Chen was sharp no-nonsense and had seen her share of con artists. Initially, she was professionally skeptical given the twin aspect. But as Olivia and Jake walked her through the meticulously compiled evidence, the financial trails, the PI's findings, the sheer scale and audacity of the fraud now escalating with the wedding expenses, Agent Chen's expression grew increasingly grim. She recognized the pattern of a sophisticated, long-term identity thief. She agreed the evidence was compelling and that the wedding, given the amount of money being fraudulently spent, was a critical juncture. She wouldn't intervene before the wedding unless Maya posed an immediate flight risk, but she agreed to be on call, ready to act if Maya's guilt was unequivocally established. The wedding date loomed, a massive glittering X on the calendar. Every interaction with Maya was a performance. I smiled, I nodded. I played the part of the supportive sister, all the while knowing I was counting down the moments to her obliteration. The anticipation was a tight coil in my chest, a mixture of dread and a fierce, righteous hunger for the reckoning to come. She was planning the wedding of the year. I was planning the exposure of a lifetime. The day of the wedding dawned with an almost mocking brilliance. The venue, a sprawling historic mansion called Lakeview Manor, was breathtaking, its manicured lawns sloping down to a glittering expanse of water. Guests dressed in their finest began to arrive, their laughter and chatter echoing in the grand foyer. Maya, when I caught a glimpse of her being fussed over by hairdressers and makeup artists in the bridal suite, was incandescent, a picture of blissful, oblivious radiance. I, on the other hand, felt a preternatural calm, the kind that precedes a devastating storm. My cheap bridesmaid dress, a pale lavender confection Maya had chosen, felt like a costume for the role I was about to play. 1 hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, our carefully orchestrated plan clicked into motion. Jake intercepted Richard's father, Mr. Harrington Sr., a stern, imposing man, and requested an urgent private meeting with him and Richard. "It concerns Maya," Jake had said gravely, "and it cannot wait." We convened in the mansion's library, a somber room lined with dark wood and leather-bound books. Richard, looking impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, but with a furrow of concern in his brow, stood beside his parents. I walked in, flanked by Jake. In my hands, I carried a thick, unassuming black binder. Agent Chen was not physically present in the room, but her detailed dossier and contact information were with Jake, a silent, potent threat. Jake began, his voice low and serious. "Richard, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, there's something incredibly serious we need to discuss about Maya. Something we've uncovered that changes everything." Richard's eyes flicked to me, a flicker of confusion. "Olivia, what's going on?" This was my cue. I stepped forward, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm, not the frantic thrumming of fear I'd lived with for so long. "Richard," I said, my voice surprisingly clear and strong. "For the past 3.5 years, Maya has been living a lie. A life built on theft. My theft." I opened the binder. Page by page, I walked them through it. The credit reports detailing $47,000 in debt accrued before the wedding planning even began. The high-interest loans, the statements from luxury retailers, the enrollment documents for her master's degree in art history paid for by student loans in my name. Photos from the PI, Maya flashing wads of cash, Maya wearing designer clothes I'd seen on statements, Maya entering the luxury loft. I showed them the shipping confirmations for online purchases delivered to addresses she frequented, all billed to accounts fraudulently opened using my social security number. Then I laid out the wedding contracts, the florist, the caterer, the venue itself, the couture bridal shop, all bearing my name, Olivia Charlotte Riley, signed by Maya with deposits paid from those same fraudulent accounts. The total for the wedding was rapidly approaching an additional $70,000, all of it. Ultimately, my liability. "This entire life she's built with you, Richard," I said, my gaze unwavering. "The sophisticated woman you fell in love with, the one with the supposed trust fund and burgeoning career, and it's been funded by my stolen identity, by my financial ruin, by years of meticulous deception." Richard's face was a mask of disbelief slowly crumbling. He sank into a leather chair, his complexion paling. He was an investment banker. Numbers and financial integrity were his world. He flipped through the pages himself, his expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror, then to a palpable, visceral outrage. Mrs. Harrington gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mr. Harrington Sr.'s face was granite. His eyes, when they met mine, filled with a shocked, dawning respect. I saw him mouth to Jake, "Is this all verified?" Jake nodded grimly. "Every bit of it, and the FBI is aware." Richard looked up, his eyes filled with a pain that was almost unbearable to witness. He looked at me, truly looked at me perhaps for the first time, and saw not just Maya's quiet twin, but a woman who had endured an unimaginable betrayal. "The ring," he whispered, looking at his own hand, then imagining the one on Maya's. The trips, her stories about her family's investments. It all clicked into place for him, the carefully constructed illusion shattered. He stood up, his jaw tight. "The wedding," he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "It's off." His mother started to protest. "Richard, the guests, the scandal." But his father placed a hand on her arm. "Constance, Richard is right. There will be no wedding." He looked at me. "Ms. Riley, I am profoundly sorry for what you've endured, and for our blindness." The hardest part was yet to come, the public humiliation. Guests were seated in the sun-dappled chapel, a string quartet playing softly. The air hummed with anticipation. Then the music swelled. Maya appeared at the end of the aisle, a vision in white, beaming, her eyes fixed on the altar, where Richard stood waiting, his face a grim, unreadable mask. My parents, seated in the front pew, radiated pride. I was in the bridesmaid lineup, a silent sentinel. Maya reached the altar. The officiant began the traditional opening. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." When he got to, "Do you, Richard, take Maya to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Richard held up a hand. A hush fell over the chapel. "No," Richard said, his voice ringing out, amplified by the microphone. "I don't. I can't marry this woman." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Maya's smile froze, then wavered confusion clouding her eyes. "Richard? What are you doing? Is this a joke?" "This is no joke, Maya," Richard continued, his voice laced with cold fury. He turned slightly to address the stunned guests. "The woman you see before you, the woman I almost married, is not who she claims to be." For the past 3.5 years, Maya Riley has been systematically stealing her own twin sister's identity. She has accrued nearly $50,000 in debt in Olivia's name before this wedding ruined her credit, funded her entire lifestyle, her clothes, her apartment, her supposed education, through calculated fraud. He gestured towards me. The real victim of her schemes, her sister Olivia, is standing right here. All eyes swiveled to me. I felt 100 pricks of curiosity, shock, pity. My parents looked utterly poleaxed, their faces draining of color. Maya was staring at Richard, then at me, her face a vortex of disbelief and dawning panic. I stepped forward, my voice calm but carrying the weight of years of injustice. "Maya," I said clearly, "you have 2 choices. Right here, right now. You can confess to everyone here what you've done. Every lie, every theft. Or Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI, who is waiting discreetly at the back of this chapel, will place you under arrest for multiple federal offenses." Maya swayed. Her eyes darted around like a trapped animal. She saw Richard's implacable face. She saw the shock and disgust on the faces of the guests. She saw me no longer invisible, but a figure of undeniable power. And then her gaze found the back of the chapel where, as if on cue, a woman in a smart suit, Agent Chen, took a small, deliberate step into the light of the doorway. The fight visibly drained out of Maya. Her shoulders slumped. The radiant bride dissolved, replaced by a terrified, cornered criminal. "No, please," she whimpered. Then the dam broke. Sobs racked her body. "It's true," she wailed, her voice cracking, the confession tumbling out in a torrent of humiliation and self-pity. "I did it. I took the money. I used her credit. I just wanted a nice life." Olivia never used her good credit anyway. She was always so boring with it. The admission, so baldly selfish, hung in the air, more damning than any accusation. My parents looked like they'd aged a decade. My mother had her face in her hands. My father stared blankly ahead, his world built on the pedestal he'd placed Maya upon, utterly demolished. My moment of triumph wasn't loud or boisterous. It was a profound internal shift. The crushing weight I'd carried for years lifted. I stood taller, breathed deeper. "My name," I said, my voice resonating with a newfound authority, "is Olivia Riley, and today I take it back." Justice wasn't just a concept anymore. It was here in this opulent chapel amidst the ruins of Maya's deceit, and it was deeply, unequivocally satisfying. The silence that followed Maya's blubbering confession was thick enough to choke on. Then chaos erupted. Murmurs turned into shocked exclamations. Guests were rising from their seats, some looking horrified, others openly pointing and whispering. The string quartet had long since fallen silent, their instruments abandoned. Agent Chen, with a nod to a uniformed officer who had discreetly entered behind her, began to move purposefully up the aisle. The click of her sensible heels on the marble floor was like a countdown. Maya, seeing her approach, let out a fresh wail of despair and seemed to shrink into herself, the expensive couture gown suddenly looking like a ridiculous costume on a broken doll. The wedding was, of course, irrevocably canceled. The venue manager, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, no relation to my old teacher, a cruel irony rushed forward his face, a mask of apoplectic fury and confusion. "What is the meaning of this? The catering, the flowers, the champagne?" I calmly addressed him, Richard and Jake by my side. Mr. Henderson, all contracts for today's event were signed by Olivia Charlotte Riley. That would be my sister Maya using my stolen identity. You have her signature, her commitment. All outstanding invoices should be directed to her. I had copies, of course. The realization that she was on the hook for the entire lavish affair. The reception alone was budgeted at $23,000, not to mention the ceremony, the 6-course meal, the open bar, the 10-tier cake Maya had insisted upon, began to dawn on Maya, adding another layer to her public humiliation. She had no money. She had no rich fiancé. She had only debt and now imminent arrest. Agent Chen reached Maya. "Maya Riley," she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "You are under arrest for aggravated identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud." The swift professional click of handcuffs around Maya's wrists was the loudest, most definitive sound in the chapel garden. She was read her rights, a sobbing, undignified mess, and escorted out past the stunned wedding guests, past the wilting floral arrangements, her fairy tale ending in a police car. My parents were shells of themselves. My mother was openly weeping, a keening sound of utter devastation. My father, his face ashen, tried to approach me. "Olivia, can't we sort this out? Privately. She's your sister." I looked him in the eye, my newfound strength holding firm. "No, Dad. There's no sorting this out privately. She committed serious crimes. She nearly destroyed my life. And for years, you both enabled her. You looked the other way, you chose her. This is accountability. This is the consequence." I turned away, unable to offer comfort I didn't feel. The chasm between us was vast and for now, unbridgeable. "I need space," I told them, my voice flat. "I need you to truly understand the gravity of what she did and how your actions and inactions contributed to it." Richard and his family were remarkably composed, though visibly shaken. They efficiently managed the dispersal of guests, issuing apologies for the unforeseen circumstances. Many guests, particularly those who knew our family history, approached me with quiet words of sympathy, some even with admiration for my courage. "We always wondered about Maya," one distant aunt murmured, squeezing my hand. "You're a strong young woman, Olivia." Jake was a pillar of quiet support, handling legal questions from the venue, ensuring I wasn't hassled. Maya's attempts at damage control, even as she was being led away, were pathetic. "Olivia's just jealous. She's always been jealous of me. She's trying to ruin my life," she shrieked, but her words fell flat against the mountain of evidence and her own public confession. The social media buzz I later heard was instantaneous and brutal. Hashtags like "a wedding from hell" and #runaway bridezilla, but actually criminal, trended locally. I stayed far away from it, wanting only peace. That night, for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I slept. It wasn't a joyful sleep, but it was deep and untroubled. The immense weight that had been crushing my chest, constricting my breath for 3 long years, had finally begun to lift. The victory wasn't celebratory. It was a grim, necessary amputation of a diseased part of my life. I had faced the monster, and the monster had blinked. There was a profound sense of relief, yes, but also a quiet exhaustion. The fight was over. The healing could begin. The immediate aftermath was messy, painful for many, but for me, it was the first day of my reclaimed life. Justice, it turned out, was a surprisingly effective sedative. 3 years. That's how long it took for the dust to truly settle, for the echoes of that disastrous wedding day to fade into a manageable hum, and for my life to transform in ways I'd once only dreamed of. The legal battle was arduous but straightforward, thanks to the overwhelming evidence and Maya's public confession. She pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges, hoping for leniency. The judge, however, was not amused by the brazenness of her crimes or her attempts to blame me during her allocution. Maya was sentenced to 18 months in a federal correctional facility for women. She was also ordered to pay $67,000 in restitution to me, the original $47,000 she'd stolen, plus an additional $20,000 to cover the immediate financial damages from the canceled wedding wedding vendors who, armed with contracts bearing Olivia Riley's name and Maya's signature, had every right to claim their dues. With Maya's conviction in hand, the process of restoring my credit was like untangling a giant sticky knot, but I tackled it with the same meticulousness I'd applied to her takedown. Armed with police reports, court orders, and letters from Agent Chen's office, I contested every fraudulent account, every negative mark. Slowly, painstakingly, my credit score climbed from the abyss of 340 back to a healthy, respectable number. I was finally Olivia Riley again on paper, not just in spirit. My life now is almost unrecognizable from the one I led, hunched over coffee cups at Rosie's Diner. The first installment of restitution money, a surprisingly substantial sum, from the liquidation of some of Maya's fraudulently acquired assets, the few that hadn't been pawned or returned, allowed me to finally enroll in that bookkeeping and small business management course. I excelled. Turns out my quiet, analytical mind was perfectly suited for it. Today, I own a small, thriving online bookkeeping service for creative freelancers. I work from my bright, airy apartment. Yes, I finally got a dream apartment even better than the one I'd been denied, with a view of a park, not a brick wall. The anxiety that was once my constant companion has been replaced by a quiet confidence. I make my own hours, choose my clients, and for the first time feel financially secure and professionally fulfilled. And Maya Karma didn't just come for her. It brought an entire army and set up permanent residence. She served 16 months of her sentence before being released to a halfway house, then to our parents' home. Her glamorous world had imploded. No rich fiancé, no high-flying career, real or imagined, no adoring social circle. Her reputation was in tatters. The last I heard, Maya was working as a cashier at a discount grocery store on the outskirts of town. She lives in her old childhood bedroom under the suffocating pity and disappointment of our parents. Every month, a small, court-ordered portion of her meager paycheck is garnished and sent to me as restitution. It's not much, often just enough to cover a utility bill, but each payment is a tangible reminder of her debt, not just to me, but to society. The once vibrant, manipulative charmer is now a subdued, resentful woman, stripped of her illusions. Our parents, well, that relationship is complicated. The public humiliation of Maya's arrest forced them to confront truths they'd avoided for decades. They are humbled, certainly. My mother, Carol, attempted numerous tearful apologies. My father, Tom, wrote me a long, stilted letter expressing his regret. I've maintained firm boundaries. We speak occasionally civilly. The old dynamic of Maya centricity is shattered, but the scars of years of favoritism and dismissal don't heal overnight. They are supporting Maya as parents often do, but it's a grim, joyless existence for all of them. They finally see Maya not as their golden child, but as a deeply flawed individual who caused immense harm. And they see me, perhaps for the first time, as the daughter who endured, who fought back, and who survived. Richard Harrington III moved on as he deserved to. About a year after the non-wedding, Jake mentioned Richard had met someone new, someone genuine. They married quietly a year later. I saw a picture once. She looked kind. I wished them well silently. There was never any romantic spark between Richard and me. Our connection was forged in crisis, not affection. Jake, however, has become a true friend. We meet for coffee, sometimes his sharp legal mind, now offering advice on my business contracts rather than criminal cases. Agent Chen even sent me a polite professional Christmas card the first year after the trial, a small gesture of acknowledgement that meant more than she probably knew. Maria from the diner. She was the first person I called when I got my business license. She cheered so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. My personal growth has been the most profound outcome. I learned that my voice matters. My worth isn't determined by anyone else's validation or lack thereof. The revenge, meticulously planned and executed as it wasn't about hate. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my name, my credit, my future, my peace of mind. It was about ensuring that the scales of justice, so wildly imbalanced for so long, were finally decisively tipped back. The satisfaction wasn't a fleeting vindictive thrill. It was a deep, resonant sense of rightness, of order restored. I had to become my own hero because no one else was going to do it for me. And in doing so, I found a strength I never knew I possessed. The truth didn't just set me free, it rebuilt me stronger and more resilient than before. So, what's the deep moral of this twisted family saga? It's not just about an extreme case of sibling rivalry or the dangers of identity theft. It's about the silent, corrosive power of familial favoritism and the profound importance of self-worth. It's about understanding that sometimes the systems designed to protect us can fail, and when they do, you have to find the courage to fight for yourself even if you're standing alone, even if the perpetrator shares your blood. I learned that invisibility can be a cloak, but it can also be a cage. Reclaiming your identity in every sense of the word is a battle worth fighting. Have you ever felt invisible in your own family or had your accomplishments overshadowed and dismissed? What would you do if your trust was shattered so completely by someone you were supposed to be able to rely on unconditionally? The answers aren't easy, and my path was extreme, born of extreme circumstances. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to fight, to be seen, heard, or to reclaim what was rightfully yours, please hit that like button, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and share this with anyone who might need to hear it. Comment with your own stories of overcoming injustice or navigating complex family dynamics. Let's build a community of survivors who empower each other. We are not defined by the betrayals we suffer, but by how we rise from them. Remember, your story is yours to write and yours alone. Don't let anyone else hold the pen, steal your pages, or try to convince you that your voice doesn't matter. You are worthy, you are strong, and your truth is powerful. Believe in your own narrative. Justice in its many forms is achievable, and peace, though sometimes hard-won, is always worth the fight. Stay tuned because everyone has a story, and there are always more truths waiting to be told.